Thank you, Senator Patrick. Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy President. Today I rise very proudly in this place, not just as the National Party Senate Leader, and I do foreshadow second reading amendments, and I'll step the chamber through those, but as a Victorian senator, and as a senator that lives in a basin community, was raised in a basin community, and a senator that was actually in this place when Penny Wong was Water Minister and when the Labor Party went into our communities, purchased buybacks during a millennial drought and devastated not just families and communities but industries as well, who are only just now recovering. And what really galls National Party senators, and you heard it from Senator Davey, you'll hear it from me, is those that choose to portray us as somehow not interested in a triple bottom line, not understanding how important ecosystems and environments are to the sustainability and health of the river and of our communities. It is incredibly galling because we live there and we know it. What you're seeing here today is a repeat of the debate that we had 10 years ago and the preceding 2 years before that as it was mooted, around a bald set of numbers that we know weren't based in science. We know that really were just picked out of the air. There was no modelling behind them. And really it was about winning city seats for the Labor Party and supported by the Greens. We knew the river needed work and we were prepared to put in place a plan that was going to be adaptive and flexible, that was going to rely on science and that actually delivered great outcomes for everyone. We don't need to be a rocket scientist, and you've even heard from Labor senators today about the trauma that the implementation of this plan has riven right throughout the northern and southern basin communities. And it is our job as National Party senators and MPs to do something about it. Now, we know that the Ministerial Council of Water Ministers is responsible for the operation and management of water at a state level. But our communities have been ripped apart, and it is Senator Davey that hears it day out and day in. It is Senator Mackenzie that has to hold the hands of farmers who have to sell up because they cannot afford their water because of this plan. It is us that deals with the human and the economic toll that this plan has wrought on our communities and industry, and it is incumbent on us to try to do something about it. And so, and I will take the interjection, Senator O'Neill, we are in government, and that is why we are moving amendments today as the second party of government, and I look forward to your support, Senator. I look forward to the Labor Party supporting these amendments. Now, the plan was continually described as an adaptive plan, objective. The Basin Plan was never to remain static. That is actually what our communities were told 10 years ago. It was supposed to adapt to new information as science came, because we knew we hadn't metered all the rivers. We didn't have the data available as a Commonwealth and as states to really map it out. So the plan was supposed to gather the science, gather the data and adapt along the way. And today is an example of the plan adapting, as we considered the establishment of an independent office for the Inspector-General of Water Compliance. I believe it's important to correct a number of falsehoods suggested by federal Labor and the Greens regarding water recoveries in the basin. They would have you believe the environment still needs more water. That's their primary argument. The environment needs more water. Volumes as high as 40,000 megalitres, because this was the figure quoted in the Basin Plan guide back in 2011. The guide's figure were just a guide, and that's a direct quote from the guide. They were based on a rule of thumb of environmental requirement at pre-development levels. There was no science behind these numbers. This was an unrealistic approach, given there were no plans to remove the many dams, weirs, locks and barrages that regulate the basin and have for 100 years. The MDBA modelling reviewed by CSIRO in 2011 found that, and I quote, 3,200 gigalitres plan delivered few additional benefits relative to a 2,800 gigalitre option. So as I stand here today, the Basin Plan has recovered over 21,000 gigalitres for the environment. That is 21,000 gigalitres of water no longer used by agriculture to produce food that is now flowing to the environment. We need to be proud of that. And given these numbers had no scientific basis, that is a hell of a lot of water. A hell of a lot of water. It has devastated the Southern Basin. Labor and the Greens would have you believe the pain endured by these communities have been for nothing and that the Murray River is still dying. Well, it's not. Go check it out. I'm here to correct those falsehoods. The MDBA, in its 2020 evaluation, Senator O'Neill, through you, Madam Deputy President, stated, and I quote, "The Basin Plan has enabled delivery of water for the environment to support the Coorong, the Lower Lakes, the Murray Mouth ecosystems through the drought, substantially avoiding the environmental degradation that occurred during the millennial drought." It's not me saying it, it's the Murray-Darling Basin Authority that's saying it. The 2,100 gigalitres that have been recovered has done what it was supposed to do. Devastated our communities, but the actual environmental degradation that would have occurred hasn't through the last drought. Today I put forward a number of other adaptations required for the Basin Plan, incorporating the latest science and new information. The National Party have listened to rural communities and the pain caused by the plan and believe we are long overdue in putting people back into the plan, putting them front and centre. Our rural communities in the basin have been producing the bulk of the nation's food for home and overseas, and food production keeps people in jobs, keeps our rural communities thriving. Just as our farmers adapt their practices based on new information, the Basin Plan has to adapt, and it's required to ensure food production can continue with confidence and certainty. As I said, there are 4 amendments, key amendments that, as National Party Senate Leader, we will be foreshadowing in this second reading speech. They are to remove the 450 gigalitre water buybacks. Get off the table, get out of the legislation the notion that government can just walk back into our communities and grab the 450, because we know the socio-economic detriment. That's number 1. 2, we're going to put confidence back on the table for irrigators and remove the threat of buybacks. If Labor Party has the water portfolio, they'll be racing back into our communities to buy back water, decimating irrigation systems. They're proud of it. They can't wait to get their hands on the chequebook. The third one is to allow new 605 projects, to put that flexibility in there for states so that they can meet those targets, because right now they can't. The Murray-Darling Basin Plan has them so wrapped tight in quite legalistic interpretation of the plan that there is the flexibility required now that we have more science and more data. And no further water is to be taken from our communities when the Basin Plan is reviewed in 2024. So those people that want to flag the 2024 review, we're going to get Basin Plan 2, no, you're not. You'll never, ever be able to come back into our communities and take water. Ever. Because we have the science and the data to ensure that the water we have right now, the 2,100 gigs I spoke about, to use it better, to water environmental assets differently, so that they get the environmental outcomes that they need and our communities continue to produce food. It's about being smarter, not using the blunt instrument of numbers alone to justify your commitment to the environment, which is what you're doing. The 450 was never guaranteed, as Labor and the Greens would have you believe, it was always conditional on no socio-economic impacts as negative. And when we actually did a review into the socio-economic impacts of the plan on our communities, you know what the Sefton report came back with, and I directly quote, page 9, "The need for change is pressing." These are our own government reviews. The need to change this plan is pressing. So that's why we are here today. There's no use for us as National Party senators, drafting a private senator's bill to sit on the notice paper in some pious approach to actually dealing with the substantive issues. We have been waiting patiently, not for a change of leader, as they would have you believe. We've been waiting patiently for the Water Act and the Murray-Darling Basin Plan Act to come before the Senate so that we would have the opportunity to move the amendments our people have sent us here to do, to save our industries and our communities from the devastation impacts of these plans. The science underpinning the requirement for the 450 for the Murray Mouth and Lower Lakes in South Australia is flawed. We learnt in 2019 of Professor Gell's work in 2007 had been altered by other scientists in 2009 to support their claim that Lake Alexandrina was a freshwater system. However, recent scientific reviews have shown us that Lake Alexandrina was always an estuary for over, wait for it, 7,000 years. 7,000 years it was an estuary. But here we are, decimating communities and families for some purpose that's not even backed by science. It can only be defined as a freshwater system based on construction of the barrages in 1940. So you're not returning it to its natural state, you're returning it to its war-like state. This led to an independent review of Lower Lakes science in April last year, which found that, and I quote, "Without the barrages, the Lower Lakes would be seasonally estuarine with prolonged periods of high salinity during droughts." Not me, not the National Party, scientists. So it makes no sense to send all the fresh water from upstream that's being used to produce vital food to South Australian lower lakes that will evaporate over 800 gigs every single year. Wetland ecologist and adjunct associate at Charles Sturt University, Max Finlayson, is arguing for change. Another scientist. I heard first-hand from him at our Senate hearing in Shepparton, along with local communities, about the devastation of the plan on our communities. The hard truth science is telling us that salty water entered the lower lakes over the top of the barrages. The 450 is not achievable, and therefore we are proposing it's removed from the legislation. Buybacks, as Robbie Sefton's report into socio-economic impacts quotes, have exacerbated the reductions in dry years, and this effect worsens the price impact on irrigators and irrigation communities. The difficulty for local communities is where buyback leads to long-term loss of economic resources and community wherewithal and increases exposure to risk that are not offset by other compensatory gains. So the milk factory closes, the rice mill closes, the cotton gin closes, and then when you can afford water again, you don't have the local infrastructure to employ people. So we are asking that water buybacks must be removed. ABARES said in September, buybacks reduce the supply of water available for irrigators, so therefore increase allocation prices unless there is a proportional reduction in demand for irrigation water. Rural communities remain fearful that any shortfall in the plan will see water buybacks back on the table, and we've heard it straight from the mouth of Labor Party MPs in the other place. They can't wait to get their hands on the chequebook and enter our communities and purchase that water. Flexibility, our third reform, relates to the sustainable diversion limit adjustment mechanism, and we want to see much more flexibility for that. We've time and time again heard from rural communities that we need flexibility in these projects, and the ledge doesn't allow for that. We need a more common-sense approach that allows us to back the science. And certainty. Our final amendment focuses on ensuring farmers and communities have certainty about the plan. John Howard said back in 2007 that these reforms were a once-off, so we cannot continually be going back into communities, reviewing the plan, Mark II, Mark III, Mark IV. We've got the water. The assets are being watered appropriately. That's a triple bottom line. I'm committed to putting people back in the plan. The National Party is committed to putting people back in the plan.
Thank
and I
you,
look
Senator
forward
Mackenzie.
to
Your
moving my
time has
amendments.
expired.